Good day to you. I come bringing good news of another office hours. Capsule. That's right. Capsule. A small segment of my office hours live stream that I do on Thursdays at 7 p.m. No, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. On twitch.tv/TheAstroPub, youtube.com/TheastroPubLive. Well, I'd love to have you come down and hang out live where we talk about Star Citizen news, lore, and more with chat here, who's going to lie to you and tell you this is a pre-recorded. It isn't pre-recorded, though you are watching a pre-recorded of a live, so take that with what you will. Today, we're going to be talking about the roadmap roundup, and this is the big one, ladies and gentlemen and NBs of the room. We've got an update on 4.0. That's right. Alpha 4.0 is on the roadmap. It is officially the next patch coming to Star Citizen in Q3 of this year. So, before we get into some more analysis and looking at things and kind of maybe setting some little bit of expectations, let's look at what CIG has put for 4.0 for the roadmap as of this last Wednesday. All right. Buttons here. Nice and big so you can see. All right. So, release view. In this week's roadmap update, we're excited to announce the addition of Alpha 4.0 to the release view, targeting Q3 of this year. Below, you'll find the initial set of features and content planned for this release, with more to come in the lead up to the launch. The following feature cards have been added to the release view, targeting a release of Alpha 4.0. Now, these are tentative releases, so these could all slip off, but first one, server meshing version 1. The initial implementation of server meshing enables multiple servers per shard to improve load distribution and facilitates navigation between two solar systems. That is pretty standard. This is going to be what CIG has dubbed static meshing. The static meshing is where they have servers that are always on 24/7, 365, that you just kind of go from point to point. This is different from dynamic meshing, Dynamic 1 specifically, where if there's no player in that server, the server will turn off and it'll turn on if player gets nearby it so that they can transition to that server. But Dynamic 1 helps CIG save some money. And then Dynamic 2, which is further down the line, will actually spin up servers to accommodate higher population areas, taking large servers and actually splitting up into smaller servers dynamically in order to facilitate larger and larger player numbers and NPC numbers. That part is still probably a ways away, but this is still going to increase the sheer number of players we have per server, will increase the number of NPCs we can see running around because it reduces the amount of data which is on a single server, the number of entities, and which frees up more space for more reactive AI, more content, more players, so on and so forth. So, all right. Next, mission system refactor. Reworking the underlying mission system to become compatible with server meshing, allowing for easier creation and maintenance of mission content. Right now, all the missions are done in a single server. So your DGS, the dedicated game server, will host and run all of these missions, and then when you complete them, they're recorded in your reputation folders, and sometimes I think as of 3.23, it's more on the back end. But up to that point, it's been only hosted on that DGS. So if you went to a different server and did missions, all those old mission logs would be gone because it doesn't register that you did those missions. With this system, they're going to change the mission system so it's no longer registered to the DGS, but registered to the backend server so that when you go from, say, if you're chasing a bounty from one server to another, you don't just lose the bounty because you crossed the server boundary. So the missions now have to be across a shard or even across the entire network rather than just across a single server. So that's that change. Transit system refactor. Reworking the transit system to use for trams and elevators to be compatible with server meshing, as well as generally more robust. Same thing, transit system might actually cross server boundaries. So if you're riding an elevator across a server, what happens? How does the handoff happen? and a lot of transits are running 24/7. But what happens if you leave a server and that server gets turned off, and when you get closer to the server gets turned back on, where is the status of the tram? What's going on? So that's a problem they've already had recently with 3.23, and PTU had that issue. They've kind of handled a little bit of it, but it definitely needs an overhaul for that. Yeah, and you fall out on recovery from places because it doesn't recover properly. Pyro 1. Now, I'm going to go over and just say the Pyro system, because this is the big one. CIG is releasing the entire Pyro system in a single drop. There's been some theory that CIG might release part of the Pyro system, like they did with the Pyro Playground, but CIG seems to be saying here they're going to be releasing Pyro 1, Pyro 2, Pyro 3, Pyro 4, Pyro 5, Pyro 6, Ignis, Vatra, Adir, Faro, Fuego, and Ver, who are all the moons of Pyro 4, I believe. Because Terminus is Pyro 6, so it's Pyro 5. No, it's Pyro 4. Pyro 4 is the gas giant. I always get those confused. Because you have Pyro 1, 2, and 3, which are solid planets, and you have Pyro 4, which is a gas giant, has a bunch of moons, but it also has Pyro 4, or Pyro 5, which is actually orbiting Pyro 4, slowly being sucked into it. And then Pyro 6, which is at the very extreme edge of the system, called Terminus. We'll read through these pretty quickly. Pyro 1. Pyro 1 is the first planet from the sun of the Pyro system. Its thick, high-pressure atmosphere hides a strange landscape beset by powerful winds and lightning strikes. Under the clouds, there is an ecosystem of plants and animals that endure its extreme high temperatures and even during powerful stellar flares. It's the first time we've heard reference of a native planet and plant life on Pyro 1. Because it's not habitable. None of the planets in the Pyro system are habitable or terraformed, actually. That's actually a misnomer. They have natural life on them. Pyro 2, Monox. Monox, Pyro 2, is the second planet from the sun of the Pyro system, nicknamed Monox for the deadly carbon monoxide in its atmosphere. It has a temperate climate and was seen as a viable candidate for terraforming shortly after its discovery. However, its proximity to the system's volatile sun makes it dangerous for human habitation. The United Nations of Earth, UNE, refused to clear it for terraformation, instead allowing corporations to harvest its natural resources. Undeterred by this potential risk, the outlaws eventually took up residence on the planet when the last corporations pulled out of Pyro in the 26th century. So, yeah, Monox is, I believe in the Pyro Playground, you could walk around without a helmet on. It was habitable. But it seems like CIG is trying to make it so that Pyro 2, you can walk around with your helmet off, but you're going to take health damage. Slowly start to take damage over time, and maybe even affect your overall health, where you're going to need to get, like, medical assistance for. None of the planets are habitable. Statement that will age poorly in the next 3 to 5 minutes. I've read through this. They're not habitable. Even in CIG's own encyclopedia, they say they're not habitable. You can live on them, but they don't count as habitable because they're not designed for human life. Monox, you can breathe, but you'll die eventually. Bloom is naturally, it says naturally habitable, but if you look at it on the encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia, and you look at everyone else, it says it's uninhabitable. So it's naturally habitable, but not by humans. If that makes sense. It's not considered habitable by the UE for whatever reason. Could also just be a copy error. We don't know. It becomes Pyro Bloom, Pyro 3, is the third planet from the sun from the Pyro system. Cold but naturally habitable, it became the epicenter for mining endeavors in Pyro. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated and other corporations constructed multiple staging sites, employees' barracks, and processing centers that were in use until the cost of their maintenance could no longer be offset by mining profits. Abandoned when the last active corporations in Pyro ceased operations in the late 26th century, they were claimed by the squatters, outlaws, and former miners who lacked the means to return to the United Empire Earth. Let me show you. Pyro System Star Citizen. The Pyro System. Galactopedia. Okay, so here is the Galactopedia. Blah, 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 blah. It's got all these cool things. Okay, let's go. Pyro 3. Oh, it says habitable now. They must have changed it. Because back when I was looking at it earlier, it said uninhabitable. So I stand corrected. It is habitable. But it's naturally habitable. It's not terraformed. Pyro 4. They're covering their tracks. Yeah, no, because I literally had this discussion with my Discord earlier. I was like, I thought Pyro 2 and 3 were habitable. And then I looked at the Galactopedia and said uninhabitable. I'm like, what? How is CIG? And it's like, nope, they changed it. It must have been a copy error on their part. And on the star map, it says uninhabitable too. So it's kind of confusing for that one. Pyro 4. The outermost planet, moon of Pyro 5. And the Pyro 4 is the outermost moon of Pyro 5. Okay. Because yeah, it's different, yeah. And astronomers theorize it was once the fourth planet from the sun in the Pyro system. At some point before humans discovered Pyro, a massive celestial body collided with Pyro 4, catastrophically warping its landscape, destroying its atmosphere and knocking it into the orbit of the nearby gas giant Pyro 5. Although the tectonic activity that has resulted from this impact has quieted down and new atmosphere is formed, Pyro 4 is far from stable. It is on the long, slow collision course with Pyro 5 and will one day either crash into it or break up into a ring. Pyro 5. This is the gas giant. The fourth planet from the sun of the Pyro system, it was given the classification of Pyro 5 when researchers came across the strong evidence that it was the outermost moon once maintained a stable orbit around the system's star between Pyro 3 and Pyro 5, when it was struck by an unknown celestial body and was knocked into Pyro 5's gravitational sphere of influence. Residents of and travelers through the Pyro system are known to harvest hydrogen from Pyro 5's green and yellow atmosphere. Let's see something else. Pyro 6, Terminus. Pyro 6 is the outermost world of the Pyro system. Its nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere is technically breathable, but contains high enough amounts of methane and carbon dioxide that it has negative effects on one's health after extended exposure. Pyrotechnic Amalgamated placed their main hub of operations in orbit around Terminus, later abandoning the station when they left the system. McMillan Station, I think is what it was really originally called, named after or McNamara Station, one of those two. Mix something. When they pulled it out, it got renamed Ruin Station, because it was supposedly the station that ruined Pyrotechnic Amalgamated. It's been weird. I haven't seen a lot of evidence that Ruin Station still exists in Pyro, but... All right, then we get to the moons. Ignis, the innermost of the moon of the gas giants of Pyro 5 in the Pyro system. The multiple canyons and dry riverbeds of its surface suggest that liquid water once flowed there in the distant past. Its frigid average temperature and deadly atmosphere of sulfur dioxide creates an unfriendly environment for those who lack proper protective equipment. Nonetheless, the moon sometimes sees visitors seeking to resupply their air reserves thanks to the small amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. Vatra. Vatra is the second moon from the gas giant of Pyro 5, which I want to think has a nickname like the Traveler or something like that. There's a name for Pyro 5, but I can't remember what it is. Its thick, high-pressure atmosphere of nitrogen and methane supports an ecosystem of planets that subsist on hydrocarbons instead of carbon dioxide. Some water is still present on Vatra in the form of ice, but it's too cold on the surface for it to exist in liquid state. Adir. Adir is the third moon from the gas giant Pyro system. Jagged mountains and rocky hills dominate its crater-ridden landscape. Because it lacks a protective atmosphere that would otherwise break apart most approaching celestial objects, its surface sees frequent impacts. The air is permeated with fine particles of dust that are generated during these events. Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the fourth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5 in the Pyro system. A hotbed of seismic activity, Pharaoh experiences frequent earthquakes that disturb its deep oceans of brackish water. The moon is an unusual ecosystem that thrives both on the surface and under the sea, supported by the carbon dioxide and nitrogen in Pharaoh's dense atmosphere. Fuego. Fire. is the fifth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5 Pyro system. Relatively temperate, but still cold. Ironic name. It has mostly carbon dioxide atmosphere with small percentages of nitrogen, sulfur dioxide, and oxygen. High amounts of iron sulfide in its soil gives its surface a yellow and black appearance. Infamous smuggler group, the Headhunters, often utilized Fuego as a stash point for goods during their nascent years in the early 2600s. On the star map, Pyro 3 says habitable no. You were right, as the lore master you are. Yeah, thank you. I didn't come up with nothing. It's not like I invented it. Vor, the sixth moon from the gas giant Pyro 5 Pyro system. Thanks to an increased greenhouse effect and its dense carbon dioxide atmosphere, it's unusually warm for a moon so distant from its sun. Its carbon-rich soil supports forms of vegetation that utilize crystalline carbon in its base structures. Before the system was overtaken by outlaws in the early 27th century, these plants were a popular subject of research among botanists. So, like I said, effectively, we're seeing the Pyro system. That's what that means. And it also includes Pyro space stations, adding rundown rest stop stations in the Pyro system, which provide basic services such as repair, sustenance, and commerce. Outposts, colonialism. A small home for AI to live and shelter. They consist of central hub and a few optional internal and external modules. They provide the basic necessities to support a small group of people for an indefinite amount of time. All of that basically means they're not only producing the system, the Pyro system, but they're also producing all of the elements of the Pyro system, the outposts, the stations, and all of the support structures. Jump points. Implementing the first jump point in the persistent universe, connecting the Stanton and Pyro systems together, includes necessary vehicle items and functionality, the jump points themselves, and their inner tunnels. Solar bursts, which we saw as CMEs. Solar bursts are dangerous natural disasters that happen regularly around older stars like Pyro. In these instances, the sun erupts in a high-energy particle wave generated from its surface, traveling at 15% the speed of light through the entire star system. This dangerous high-energy particle wave can be avoided by hiding behind other objects that are big enough. It's funny that it says 15% the speed of light, because if it's traveling at 15% the speed of light, ships travel at 20% the speed of light in quantum. Which means if you're going at full speed away in the opposite direction, you can outrun the wave. All right. Life support. Now, this what I just talked about is Pyro. So, CIG is doing the thing that they like to do, which is they're taking all of their individual parts of an actual system, like in this case the Pyro system, or individual parts of a feature, in this case the Pyro system, and they're just smashing them together. So all of the Pyro, or not smashing them together, pulling them apart into individual releases. So Pyro 1, Pyro, it's like it's this big list, which is very impressive. Less impressive than I say the Pyro system. It's like what? Count them off real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 things, which I'm sure are individual that people have to work on, but those 15 things could be summarized as adding Pyro. And if you want to get technical, you can add the jump points, adding Pyro and the means to travel between Pyro and Stanton. That's a lot of saying that. Now, and this is very similar. Life support, engineering, charge and drain, and multi-tool updates, and fire hazard and fire extinguisher. All of these are the same system. They all work on the same resource system, the RIC system that they've been talking about. But we'll go through each individual one. It's kind of like putting up 15 cars instead of general UI update. Yeah, they did the same thing with 3.23. Where it's like this huge, impressive list, but it's actually like, I think I calculated it being like 11 items, even though it's like 30 items on the roadmap, which is smart, I think, because your average Star Citizen backer, and I hope you who are watching me are not the average. You're special and unique because you've chosen to watch me, which is weird, honestly. Just doesn't care. They see big list and they go, look at big list. Monkey neuron activate. Neuron activation. Yeah, happy. Big list. Look, good things. And to be fair, a lot of this is does take a lot of work. Like adding the pyro system is just saying, oh, just the pyro system is kind of underselling the effort it takes to make the pyro system. But from a like end user's perspective, it's the pyro system. Like, that's what you're getting. So I get the argument for and against the idea, but I think it's better to break it out because you emphasize there's a lot of there are a lot of different moving parts in this, and it also kind of emphasizes that, it's big. Be happy. Be excited. Life support. Implementing the first implementation of onboard life support systems in ships, which entails a ship component that generates breathable gas when turned on, and management of said life support component within the vehicle loadout manager. Which is a new thing they're going to have to add to 4.0, which they haven't mentioned. Engineering. Allows players to manage, maintain, and repair various ship systems. Players can assume different roles that each provide a unique gameplay loop. With engineering gameplay, players have to contend with item degradation, malfunctions, and power management. Charge and drain. Adding the ability for players to drain, store, and charge objects and power during using the multi-tool, including the ability to overcharge objects and also remove distortion damage, which is new. I don't think they've talked about that in the past. Multi-tool updates, raising the multi-tool up to the standard from Squadron 42 with additional functionality like cutting for specific scenarios, repair, and updates like improved handling, integrated UI, and the use of batteries to operate it. Fire hazard. Implementing fire hazard system, which tracks fire and temperature on static and dynamic objects. For the initial release, fire will be set up on a select few vehicles. Okay, so fire is only going to be happening on a couple of vehicles, which no one's going to use because they could be lit on fire. And I can almost guarantee you all of those vehicles will be massive vehicles, like the Polaris and the Idris sort of thing. But and fire extinguisher. All tasks required to implement functioning fire extinguishers in game. This feature will work alongside the fire hazard system. And then MFD rework and new displays. Like this is something that's weird because they talk about this, but they could break this up into like 5 or different elements, which I'm surprised they didn't. Maybe it's because they don't have a 100% idea of what's coming in, so they're just kind of giving a generic one for this one. Rebuilding ship multifunction displays in building blocks, including new design functionality and customization options. This update will also include a select number of updated ship HUDs, giving greater visibility as well as manufacturer-based visual overhaul. Okay, so this is where I'm going to tell you something that's kind of nuts. I believe with MFDs, one of the discussions they had was that they could pull MFDs off of the MFD and put it on your visor. So you could have a customized visor with special MFDs on your visor so you don't have to look down. Similar to pulling out like windows in MMOs and pulling out specific windows up so you have access to them. It's that idea. So like when you're on a ship, you can like keep your fighter display, like where you're only attacking a specific target, you can have that target up on your visor instead of being in an MFD. Yeah, I believe they showed it off at CitizenCon as well. But that's part of that process. So, in your helmet, yeah. So, I didn't remember if they showed it, but they'd been talking about it for like the entirety of last year. When I first saw that, I'm like, they're creating an MMO. This is an MMO feature. All right. And then the best edition, the Kazi Grazer, the boy. Here comes the boy. Here he comes. Here he is. These large, warm-blooded herd animals were originally discovered in the vast plains of Kazi on Terra, which is where Asperia is founded, is Kazi Terra. It's also where they found a ancient civilization which once lived on Terra, which no one knows where they went. Most notable for their unusual method of carrying their eggs in their underside. The Kazi Grazer has become one of the standard seed animals, and they can be commonly found in the most terraformed planets in the UEE. Space Cows. Additional player customization. Following the release of the new character customizer in Alpha 3.23, this update adds additional hair and facial hair options, as well as face piercings, which is something they talked about. And I think tattoos possibly even. So, and lastly, the RSI Zeus Mark II ES. Building, balancing, and implementing RSI's small multi-crew ship, the Zeus Mark II ES into the game. So, kind of went through all of this more because I was kind of interacting with chat there for a moment, which I usually don't do with these capsules, but I think it's important. Now, that looks great. We can summarize it as a couple of things. Pyro, jump points, resources, the Kazi Grazer, MFD updates, Zeus, and more options for the free character. That's still 7 things, and they're still going to add more stuff. This is only part 1 of multiple parts of updating they're going to do as they go along. Now let's take off our hype hats. All right, let's take off our fancy hype hats and replace them. You know, realistic hats, our utility hats. Okay, using Jared's analogy here. So with this realism hat on, let's be honest. There are only 2 things that need to happen in 4.0. Those 2 things are Pyro, well, 3 things. Pyro, jump points, and server meshing. Those are the only 3 things that need to be added to the game for 4.0. Anything else I just read that didn't involve those 3 things directly existing, out. Do not expect them. So notice how I went through every single planet, talking about all the planets and that kind of stuff. Do not expect every single planet to be in there. Do not expect colonial outposts to exist. Do not expect life support systems, solar bursts, space stations, all of the moons, engineering, charge and drain, fire hazard, MFDs, Kazi Grazers, customization, and Mark II. Take all of those ideas and put them into a pile of nice to haves, but are not coming in 4.0. Not because I don't think they will, but because if 3.23 has taught us anything, CIG will push items. If they come with push comes to shove, they will push items away from the initial release so they can get that initial release out. It's a practical application of what they need to do. And I think we need to calm our hype jets a little bit and realize that that's what's going to come in 4.0. Anything else is a bonus. Anything else will be great. And I'd love to see CIG make me wrong on this one, because there's no one else out there that wants to see a massive release of 4.0 with a ton of cool things. I would love it. But 3.23 has proven to me, and I think it's proven to a lot of people, that there is a limit to what CIG can implement, test, and deal with, because there's so many factors that are going on behind the scenes that I don't think even CIG has enough resources, which is funny to say with over 1,000 employees, to fully deal with in the amount of time they've allotted themselves. Not that it's impossible, it's just that you only have so many QA. You can only push so many builds. You can only have so many people helping you test stuff with like PTUs and such, until you just have to push it out. So keep that in mind when doing this. That being said, server meshing, jump points, and pyro, even if it's a handful of planets, that's a massive undertaking. Server meshing alone is going to change how you play this game, let alone jump points and a brand new system. It's kind of nuts to think about that. So while it is important to be practical and reasonable about what's being in there, all of these are tentative, none of these are committed, we know what's important, and that important stuff is a huge changer for the Star Citizen. But with that all being said, and of course, before we go to that point, Q3. Q3 is an estimate, and people have asked, what is Q3 for CIG? It's not what you think. Q3 could be August. It could also be October. Generally speaking, I believe CIG thinks around September is their Q3, end of September, early October. And because of CitizenCon, it tends to take resources away from some of the other aspects of the game, so they don't always have everything in there. So yeah, as chat's saying, usually Q3 is 2020 is 2025 is SitCon or after. So this, based off of what CIG is also implementing with CitizenCon, or at least hinting at. If you want to know that, watch my previous video, which I'll post up here, which is the Squadron 42 monthly report. I think that Squadron 42 is going to dominate CitizenCon this year. And as a result, and 1.0 will dominate CitizenCon. So they probably want to have 4.0 out before CitizenCon. So I think that's going to be the imperative. That is the time crunch. Invictus was the time crunch for 3.23. CitizenCon is the time crunch for 4.0. So it'll either be out it'll be out a week before October 17th. That's will be my guess. So if you're thinking about that, that's going to be. With all that being said, as always, I want to hear your thoughts down below. Am I being too cynical? Am I being too optimistic? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoy this, make sure you hit that like button. It really does help to spread the word about these. Hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified when these release. And join us live, twitch.tv/theastropub and youtube.com/theastropublive to join the discussion with chat here and make my life a living hell. And with all of that said, as I always say, hope to see you someday in the black.